Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Chabad House of Delmar, together with my co-host Mark Cornish, statewide news service, JBizTechValley.com. And here, as you can see yourself, columnist for the Jewish Press.
Right, I'm having fun with all three assignments, Rabbi, and my column in the Jewish Press is called Albany Beat, and I talk about how government relates to the Jewish community, or doesn't, as the case may be. And with us today, though, is someone that I can't write about because it's more visual and sound, audio and visual. Steve Van Zandt is a comedian and impressionist.
Yes.
And a longtime friend.
Yes,
and
known each other a long time.
Please, welcome to the Jewish View.
Maybe
well, I thank you both for having me.
Impression a government official. We'll
That's
say
right.
we have government officials on.
Yeah, you could do like a real generic one, for New York State government, but I don't want to go down that road.
Did you ever do a Shelley Silver one?
No, never did. No, because I gave away my handcuffs. No, just kidding. No, but I never really focused a lot on local politicians per se, only because in my travels, if I go outside of the state, people have no idea who Shelley Silver was.
Because you do impression or
famous, super famous, nationally famous people
on cruise ships.
Exactly. I might be on a cruise ship someplace across the world, and if I do Shelley Silver, they're all going to look at me and say, "I paid for this. What is this?" So no, that never worked out.
So who are your favorites besides De Niro?
People tell me I look a little bit like De Niro. I don't know, maybe a little bit. I don't know. A little bit. Huh? Yo. Of course, Meet the Parents comes to mind, But
you talking to me?
You're talking to me. And of course, his son-in-law in the movies is Jewish, and so we got that whole angle going on. Right. But we could actually do a whole skit right here. But De Niro is one that people tell me I look like a lot, because I got the Italian features. I'm a little.
No one told you look like the Steve Van Zandt from Bruce Springsteen's band.
I get that one all the time, and I got great stories about that. Of course, having that name, I was born with that name, and he was not. In fact, I met him, and he told me this story. What happened was his mother remarried, and he took his father's surname, and he was adopted as Steve Van Zandt. But that doesn't stop people from sending me requests for fan mail from all over the world, thinking I'm him.
Wow.
Do
you answer them?
No, I just tell them, I don't know how you got through my website and you missed the word comedian about 10,000 times. My picture's all over the place, my resume, and somehow they get right to that email. And they email me through there thinking I'm the singer. And
do you forward it to him? Did you get his contact info?
But no, how I ended up meeting him was I had a radio show here in Albany a few years back, and I thought it was time to kind of get him on the air and talk to him about the confusion, because he was aware of me and I was aware of him, but we've never actually met. But it's kind of funny, going back to the mid-'80s, I'm in bed one day and I get a call. And it was a friend of mine who lives in Manhattan goes, "When did you start playing guitar with Bruce Springsteen?" And I had no idea who this musician was with Bruce, who's now more famous now because of The Sopranos, of course. Yes. He's an actor as well as a musician. But back then, I wasn't a Springsteen fan. Had no idea who he was. And I said, "What are you talking about?" They said, "Pick up the New York Times. There's a picture of you, a big picture of you on the entertainment section with Pat Benatar and Dizzy Gillespie and Miles Davis and all these very famous musicians. They had done an album together to fight apartheid, to bring awareness to apartheid. And they somehow pulled my photograph out and ran it with his story, and it went on a wire service all over the country. And that's when I first became aware of who this guy was.
Did you get the New York Times
article? I have the clipping, and he even has a copy of it now. So
when the Times gets it wrong, the gray lady gets it wrong.
What are you going to do? But I always look at it this way. My name could be Bob Hope, the guy, another comedian. That would be probably a bigger curse than having a musician's name.
Right.
But I told him, you need to change your name back because I was born with that name.
That's right.
We're on the Jewish View, so we love the Borscht Belt and the Catskills.
Yes, I did all that stuff.
Tell us about
absolutely.
Some stories about the Borscht Belt.
Well, we were just talking a little bit before we started about how I was kind of on the end cusp of the Borscht Belt,
the vibrancy of the
exactly.
Borscht Belt,
And of course, I don't have to tell you guys how big that was. That was where you were coming up into your fame, the Borscht Belt, and then by the time I got to it, it was where you were kind of coming down. Unfortunately,
I feel bad about that. Always.
Yeah,
I always loved going.
Oh, it was great, and I met a lot of Pat. Actually, when I started performing there, again on the weaning end of the Borscht Belt, I met people like Pat Cooper who were still performing there.
Right.
Some of the big name comedians were still performing in that area.
There was one guy who was perpetually at all of these. His name was Mal Z. Lawrence.
Mal Z. Lawrence. No, it doesn't ring a bell.
Never rang a bell with
No,
you?
no. Was it a comedian?
Unbelievable. Comedian, and I just...
Doesn't ring a bell, but you know, there was still some pretty big names that were still doing it then. But by the time I got around to doing the Catskills, there were very few of them were left.
So
Yeah, I know.
besides Pat Cooper, who else did you remember?
Oh God, Henny Youngman.
Really?
Henny Youngman. Yep, I worked with Henny Youngman a couple of times, and he was in his early 80s
Yeah,
and still
right.
performing.
And you were in your 20s.
I wish I brought some pictures. I have
that's all right.
all kinds
That's
of
all
great pictures of stuff that
Next
I could
time.
share. Next time,
We'll have you back.
Absolutely, next time. I'll be watching you. But no, I made a lot of those great. A lot of them were great, and a lot of them, you know, were miserable. But that's the way show business is. Some are really nice, some are not very approachable. But you know, again, being
Did you ever do an impression in front of the live person?
no, I've never gotten to work with somebody to actually mimic. You know,
Oh.
and that I would have loved to. I'm a big Sylvester Stallone fan. You know, I'd love to come to go. You know, I really love all your movies. You know, I just want to tell you, you're the best. You know, absolutely. You know, but no, I never got a chance to meet a lot of the performers I've mimicked.
Because, do you watch Saturday Night Live?
Love Saturday Night Live,
Like
sure.
when Kate McKinnon does an impression of Hillary Clinton. Hillary
Right.
Clinton comes out.
Comes in. They were sitting at
and
the
on
bar
show,
there.
and they're sitting on, and
sit-
she's doing Hillary in front of Hillary.
Right,
and
right.
Just like,
Yeah, and she doesn't really, of course, you know, she's kind of got the voice close, but she's obviously a lot younger.
Yeah, right.
And so there's a little bit of a clash
The
there.
wig.
The wig.
Yeah.
But, you know, again, when you're doing a show like Saturday Night Live, you've got to change in and out of this stuff literally
Yeah,
in
right.
minutes. And so they try to do the
But
best
you also
they
want to
can.
get the essence.
Essence.
Because
That's the key.
That's the key. Because in the
Right.
in the first 3 or 4 or 5 years of SNL, you know, you didn't get into costume. You just
That's
did
right.
the impression without the costume.
Exactly, like a
So-
Chevy Chase doing Gerald Ford, for
Gerald
example.
Ford, right. He just
right.
tripped.
And he wasn't even trying to mimic the voice per se. He was
No.
trying to just do an essence of him. you
Right.
know, But,
And so they never-
do a great job considering how they have to flip that over very quickly. You know.
Big money.
Oh, absolutely.
It's big money.
Very big,
Yeah,
very
so-
big. Huh?
So,
But,
How long does it take for you to, you know, like you say, hey, there's a celebrity I'm going to mimic?
You know, it's funny.
Or I'm going, you know, how long does it take for you to work on it?
I
Your natural? Tell us
well,
about how you got
yeah.
into it. That'd be
well,
interesting.
Sure, absolutely. I found at a very early age I had a knack for mimicry, you know, and I think a lot of kids do, because when we're very, very young, we're observers, and sound is very important when you're a child, you know, the sound of your mother's voice, the sound of your father's voice. And I just had a knack at an early age, even before I can remember. My mom said you had a knack for mimicking the TV, Superman, and TV shows and stuff like that, the Andy Griffith Show growing
yeah?
up. And I just had a knack for it. And I can remember my mother, who was 100% Italian, being on the phone with her mother, speaking in Italian, and I would start mimicking, even at 5, 6 years old, the Italian words. I didn't even know what they were, but I would just mimic her. You know, and then I would just show off her relatives and just start doing my impression of my mom on the phone.
you were a
and-
loving child.
Oh my!
weren't
Well,
you?
middle
You were
child,
a
guys. You know, come on.
You had to
The
stand
middle
out.
child, you get no attention. I don't have to tell you. You know, I'm one of 9 children.
Yeah,
a
well-
middle child. Nobody paid any attention.
Well,
to
Rabbi
me.
Simon can relate to that.
Relate to that, there you go.
Because he's
Okay.
got 13 kids.
Holy cow! Who kept score in the family? Holy cow! That's crazy.
Imagine he's all the grandkids now.
Oh, my God.
Can't remember their names. Like,
Oh my God! It's got to be a scorekeeper when you get up to those
there
numbers.
you go.
But then it just kind of evolved. I mean, as I got into high school, it's the classic, you know, class clown mimicking the teachers.
Right.
I actually went on the PA system one time as a gag. I talked my way into doing the principal's voice on the sound system. You know, I got in a little trouble for that. But I worked at a Burger King. It was one of my first jobs, and I would practice my impressions on the mic. Back in the days when you used to order
On
the
the
food
mic, yeah.
on the mic into the kitchen.
That's right.
And I used to even my boss. I used to mimic his voice into the kitchen. And one time he was back there. I didn't know it. He wasn't too happy. But then I would do impressions, you know, in different voices, and then it just kind of evolved. And then about a year after high school,
So what high school did you go to?
I went to Columbia High School, right in East
In East
Greenbush, right
Greenbush,
across the
okay.
river from here. And
Blue Devils, right?
that's right. Very good. You are
Yeah,
good. You are
no,
be careful. You are be careful. But then about a year after high school, back in the mid to late 70s, the Gong Show was the big thing,
Yeah,
remember?
right.
With Chuck Barris. And I auditioned for that TV show. And how I did that was, not too far from here, up on Central Avenue, there was a nightclub. It was kind of like the karaoke of its time. They would do gong shows. They would have little talent shows. And it was
Was that J.B. Scott's?
it was actually, I think it's a strip joint now. But
Oh, DeCarlo's?
DeCarlo's.
Oh,
That used to be called September's years
Yes,
ago.
yeah, okay.
Okay, and they did a gong show. It was $50 first prize. I won that. I thought that was the end of it. Great, $50. I'm 19 years old.
Okay.
It's $1 million. And the guy called me back. He goes, that we packed them in. He goes, that thing was such a hit. You were such a hit. He goes, I'm going to do it every week for 12 weeks. We'll take the 12 winners, and whoever wins that one, I'll fly him out to LA to see if they can get on the National Gong Show. So, long story short, I get back into the competition. I win that. They fly me out to LA. I get on the show. I get a perfect 30-point score.
Yeah.
I meet Chuck Barris. I'm like, wow, maybe I'm a big star. So I came back here and I started getting some club work and locally, and then it led into New York City. I started doing some of the comedy clubs down in New York and a couple out in LA, and and then like a dummy, I got married really young. That kind of slowed things to a screeching halt for a while, and then I started getting into voiceover work. Somebody heard my show and said, "Hey, you'd be great at doing some animation and maybe some voiceovers."
Did you start mimicking your wife when she said no?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. You don't mess with the wife's voice.
No.
But no. But I started just kind of taking work wherever I could get it.
You have any kids?
I have 2 children. They're 18 years apart. My son is 30. He'll be 37 in January. My daughter just turned 19. So it's kind of crazy. I know. I don't know.
Well,
I get 2 reactions.
She's double the age, right?
Pretty much.
38.
It's funny. You could probably relate to this, Rabbi. You get 2 reactions when you tell people the age of your children. If you start with the one that's really young,
Right.
or the really older one, like the 37-year-old, they say, "Wow, you look way too youthful to have a 37-year-old son," which is very nice. But if I say I have a 19-year-old daughter, they go, "Well, what's a old fart like you doing with a 19-year-old daughter?"
Yeah, that's right.
And so, yeah, I mean, and they're completely opposite. I mean, both of them have no sense of humor whatsoever.
Well, they're a generation apart. They're a generation apart.
That's true.
So they do come from a different
Exactly,
perspective.
exactly. But
well, my mother's the youngest of 5,
Right.
and she's 17 years younger than her older
Wow, that's-
sister.
that's a
so
big-
was a big thing. So I understand that.
yeah, and I married a woman who is also one of 8, and she's the youngest, and there's 20 years between her and her oldest brother.
Right, so
I
she
think-
understands
Yeah,
that,
absolutely,
yeah.
and I think that's why we're drawn to each other. We both relate to the big families, and she's Irish, and I'm Dutch, Italian, and Indian, so it's a real mix of crazy combinations there.
So after high school,
Yeah, after high school, I
then you did
the Gong Show.
September's, the
I
Gong
did
Show.
the Gong
Do
Show.
you have a tape, or do you have
It's
any
interesting.
recording of that?
Videotape was just starting to come
Right.
around out that time, and of course back then I left it up to 5 or 6 people to videotape it for me, of which none of them did. The technology was really low. I mean,
But it
I think
wasn't live.
it wasn't live, but
So
nobody
you could
taped
come-
it.
But
Well,
you could come home and tape it. When
well,
you-
I didn't
they
have a
told you-
VCR, and the TV station. Foolishly, I should have reached out to the local TV station.
Yeah.
I think it was at that time it was Channel 6
Right.
to tape it, and I never did that because back then they had it on those big
Right,
carts.
they may still have it. 'Cause
Yeah,
they
I've tried.
save-
I've tried NBC. I've tried.
But Channel 6, what did they say?
They have nothing. They don't have any
And Chuck
copies.
Barris passed away recently, didn't he?
Did he? No.
No, he's
I
still
don't think so.
alive?
No.
Then
Chuck Barris-
contact him, he may have.
I know it.
Do you remember
Hey,
the
Chuck,
date
you
that
remember me? I
do
was
you
one of
remember-
10,000 contestants on your show.
But the thing is that,
Yeah.
Ed McMahon with his Star Search.
Star Search.
Well, they still pull out clips.
Right.
Of the
Big-
current stars
Right,
and
who
where they
started
were
out
when
on
they
there,
started
like Rosie
out.
O'Donnell,
So
for
they
example.
still have those Star Search.
Yeah,
there,
what I was hoping was
so you might still be able to contact Chuck
I'm
Barris
always
because that was
looking.
his production.
I need to do that, but I also came up dry in my temps. But unlike a lot of shows, for some reason, the Gong Show never put out the box set. These TV
Right.
shows
Yeah,
in the
yeah.
70s, 80s.
Sure.
You can buy the box sets now. For some, I guess they were so embarrassed after looking at that show. They said, "I don't know if we want to invest in box sets of the Gong," because there was some crazy acts.
There
in
were, yeah.
And in fact, the lady that came on just before me, she got so nervous, she literally ran off the stage before she even started. I had to come out and follow that.
Oy.
But I was 19 years old. I was in a
Sure.
borrowed suit
Uh-huh.
that didn't fit me. A buddy of mine who was like 6'2", you'd think it would fit me. I'm 6'5".
Yeah, right.
If people that saw it said, well, I was distracted by your really short shirt, the shoe. But I never saw it. I'd love to see it because I'd love to show my kids.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
say, I was 19
There
on national
are
television.
ways to get it.
Yeah, I got to
So-
dig it out.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Do you remember the date that you actually?
Yes, the air date was like May 19th, 1978. It hurts just to even say that.
So
but,
you were born in 1960?
I was born in 1958.
58.
Yeah, so this was just before my 20th birthday.
Uh-huh.
You know, so 4 or 5 months before my 20th
Yeah.
birthday.
So what other gigs did you ever pull?
Well, after I did the Gong Show, I started doing the places you'd expect a comedian to work, and that would be in like in New York City at all the Improv and the Catch a Rising Star, Caroline's, the Comic Strip,
Right.
all those places. I saw Eddie Murphy when he was just basically starting out in a club.
Jerry
down there.
Seinfeld,
Jerry
maybe?
Seinfeld,
Yeah.
Bill Shecht, who was didn't become famous comedian himself, but he was the main writer for David Letterman for his entire run.
Right.
Guys like that I knew and worked with. Now here's a really great story.
All right, there we go.
I'm digging out an old. I had a comedy club in Lake George from '94
Right.
to '99, and I was just getting remarried, and I said, I don't want to travel in the summer. At that time I was doing a lot of traveling, and I decided to open a comedy club in Lake George just for the summer months, you know, and. I had every comedian, when you open up a room like that, every comedian on the planet comes out of the woodwork looking for work, up-and-coming guys. And there was a young guy, up-and-coming guy, who was going to school at a college in town called St. Rose at the time.
Oh, Jimmy Fallon.
Jimmy Fallon.
Okay.
And I didn't realize that I had turned him down until decades later. I'm in my basement, and I got an old file cabinet with some headshots and some VCR tapes. And I'm cleaning it out, and there's a headshot of Jimmy Fallon stapled to a resume with like 2 credits on it, you know, and a headshot and a VHS tape.
If only.
And Jimmy Fallon auditioned for that room in Lake George, but I don't remember putting him on stage because I would have remembered. And because I had so many guys that I used professionals, and I didn't want to use some amateur that was just starting out, because he's probably about 19, 20 himself, you know. So I turned him down. Well, how'd that work out? And he does a lot of impressions. It's not, maybe part of me didn't want him to do that.
Maybe he doesn't remember that, and you could still get
I
on
would
the
love
Tonight Show.
Yeah, and actually, I know a guy who was in college with him, who's still tight with him, and sees him. And I said, I need to get this to you so you can get it to him. You know.
Oh,
you know.
you could get it to him.
Absolutely.
Easily,
Yeah, let's look at that local
and in
connection.
fact, the Sienna guys are doing a commercial right now to get it on there.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, they're doing some sort of
he's
wacky...
still got a good local connection to the
Oh,
capital
absolutely,
region. Yeah,
sure.
absolutely.
So we can help you with that.
Oh, I appreciate that. You're still trying to book me.
The business of being a comedian, you
Yeah.
know, I talked to one once,
Yeah.
and he just says, keep your day job. That was his...
Yeah, you know, look, you know, the thing is, it's not like, you know, the old adage you hear, you're either starving or you're famous. That's not necessarily true. There's a lot of working regional comics that make a very good living regionally, you know, and the key to me, for me, is diversification. I do corporate events, I do the clubs, I do the resorts, I've done the cruise ships, but I do private events, and also I do a lot of voiceover work. I have a home studio where my voiceover work has been heard all over the world. And, you know, wouldn't know it, but I've never been to Dubai, for example, but my voice has been there a number of times. You know, I have clients that I do voiceover stuff for, character voices in commercials, things like that. And, you know, animation, things like that. But the guys that, you know, that are living out of their car, you know, they're 19, 20 years old, that's great. But, you know, you're right, you can't do that forever either. And it is nice to have something to fall back on,
Yeah.
you know.
So what would you have fallen back on? What did you major
Well, that's,
in
you know,
college?
well, I was, you know, artistic. You know, I thought I'd be in some kind of a visual arts, maybe a graphic artist or something like that. I always had an interest in doing that kind of thing. But my own daughter's kind of in that situation now. She's an unbelievably excellent visual artist, you know, and she wants to get into theater and stuff like that. I said, still, you know, rather than work your way up through there, get that degree, and then you're on an even playing field with everybody else that wants to do that. Because sometimes talent alone is not going to do it for you, you know. And even Jimmy Fallon dropped out of
St. Rose.
He dropped out of St. Rose, and they went back and gave him the honorary degree. You know, had he not been as famous, I don't think that honorary degree would have been coming. You know, so it's always good to stick.
And then he had to work for it. He had to give the commencement speech.
Absolutely, that's right.
It
Exactly.
wasn't like, you know, they just gave it to him.
Exactly, but diversification. You know, I tell a lot of these guys. You know, they say, "How do I start?" Well, I say, you know, don't eliminate the firehouses and places. That's a good place to get your feet wet. You know, do the firehouse, do the garden club, whatever it is. Get your feet wet, and you know, because there's always going to be venues.
So how do you do an impression of a rhododendron?
Very carefully.
You know who he was doing?
Christopher Lloyd,
Christopher Lloyd
Back to the
from
Future.
Taxi.
Yeah, the actor Christopher Lloyd.
Yeah.
You know, I can transform right into him. Look, body. But you know, so the key is, you know, and then the other thing is I tell guys is keep the stuff fairly clean because you'll work more. It's funny, I get these guys all the time. Hey, can I come and work for you? Because I book talent as well. Sometimes I'll put together a corporate event. There's a fundraiser. I need like 5 comedians for a 2-hour fundraiser. Okay, so they'll say, can you put that together? And I have a very difficult time finding guys that can work super clean. Yeah. Because, that might work in, the Funny Bone in a comedy club at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Comedy works, yeah.
Right, and that's great. But if you want to do a corporate event where everything is so politically correct, you got to be really careful. And it's very difficult to find these guys that work on that.
Yeah, that's stodgy, the corporate events? I mean,
not necessarily, it
some
depends.
of them could be...
Yeah, but you got to understand the audience is going to be a very diversified audience, religiously, politically, intellectually, socially, and they
don't want to hear the F word.
And they don't want to hear, not only that, they don't, maybe, it's funny because a lot of comics like to do political humor, and that's great if you're famous. But if you're not, you're eliminating half your audience right now. So if you're pro-Trump or you're pro-Hillary and you're up there ranting on one or the other. Unless you do both.
Like Jimmy Fallon does both.
Right, that's true.
That's what he does.
And that's exactly why they picked him.
And I think Johnny Carson started that.
This is true. I do believe I did that. Yeah, that's true. But
I know a story with Jackie Mason, who I like.
Who's a very conservative guy, actually.
Yeah, he started making fun of President Obama.
Right.
And he said, the Jewish people who come are liberals, and they didn't appreciate it.
That's right.
He said he cut it out.
He's right.
Exactly what you're saying, because he felt he's conservative. Exactly. But if his audience is liberal, they don't want to hear him making those kind of jokes.
And that doesn't mean, Rabbi, that doesn't mean you can't have your own political point of view. And it doesn't mean you can't say it in there, but it's how you say it. For example, I think the trend now is, because the country is so divided, even if you take comedy, you had this female comedian that was just doing a show just literally days after the election a couple of weeks ago. And she was very upset by the outcome. She's a big Hillary supporter, and people are paying anywhere from $35 to $200 to see her. And and liberals and the conservatives alike don't want to be preached to when they're going. They want to come and see you. They want to put you back in that box when they're done, and they want to go home. She went off on this tangent, anti-Trump thing, and literally even the people that supported her were like, enough already. We're not here to be, talked down to, or we just went through all of that.
Sure.
This is escapism for us. Let's not relive this all over again. And she, instead of kind of getting the vibe from the audience, she started dropping the F-bomb, going, well, F you and F you and F you. Sure. And she started insulting. So it was already, she opened up a wound, and then she threw salt in it by, basically chewing them all out for actually disagreeing with her point of view. And that's really not what people want either.
And it wasn't Rosie O'Donnell.
No, it wasn't Rosie O'Donnell, who might have a case for that.
That's right.
But it was Wanda Sykes.
Wanda Sykes. Wanda Sykes. Oh, yeah. Well,
and I saw the clip. You can actually.
But she's salty anyway.
Very salty. But she really went off the deep end. Okay. And it's funny. A lot of musicians do the same thing. Like Bruce Springsteen. They tend to go. They go up there, and you tend to get a speech out of these guys.
So let me just ask you about the. And maybe you could just give round numbers.
Sure.
How much does it cost to book you or book someone on a cruise ship or for a corporate event?
Well, it's all going to be relative. I'm not going to get as much as Jimmy Fallon if he was doing a comedy cruise. I'm not. But on the other hand, a professional like myself is going to be dramatically more money than some guy who's working at Walmart during the day, and he's a comedian on Friday and Saturday night at the local comedy club. So it's all relative. Now, as far as the cruise
do you get $10,000? Do you get $50,000?
It depends.
Do you get $5,000? Do they drop you off by a helicopter, fly you down, land you on the boat?
You use the cruise. The cruise as a question. Depends on the cruise line. Depends on the agent you're having. Your agent is a negotiator.
Right.
He's a guy that's selling you.
Sure.
The more money you make, the more money he makes.
Because it's a percentage.
Exactly. Right. So some agents are better than others. I don't have one guy that does all my. Real famous people have one guy.
Okay.
Okay. Guys at my level might work with 15 different guys.
Wow.
And whatever one, I got this date available. Yeah. This is what it pays, and it's up to me whether to say, well, I don't lock in that date, or do I want to wait for something better to come along?
I see.
And the other good side of that is that it keeps my calendar more full if I'm working with a lot of different people.
So you're not going to give me a number, are you?
Well, the most money I ever made for one job, that's what your question is?
Good, I'll take that.
Was $25,000.
Okay.
Okay. Now, there's comedians out there that probably make $250,000 a show.
Sure, no,
You know?
I understand.
So,
that, yeah.
so obviously, now, if it's some 19-year-old, as I said, he works at Walmart.
No, but
he's not going to get $25,000.
He's lucky if he gets $1,500.
He's lucky if he gets $25. You know,
Okay.
because
And do you go on the boat when they dock, and then you do your show, and then you leave, or are
It
you on the
depends.
cruise for a week?
Well, it depends on the ship. See, sometimes you get, and this is look, a cruise industry, a cruise line is a business as well.
Yeah.
So what they used to do is they'd fly you onto a ship.
Yeah.
And then they'd fly you off for that ship, and then they'd fly you some other person out. But then they realized, wait a minute, we could save a lot of money.
I envision you climbing down the ladder and then jumping onto the boat.
I have actually done
as
that.
it hovers.
It's funny you should bring that up. One time I had to fly onto a cruise ship that was already en route on its cruise. It was like halfway through the cruise.
Yeah.
I wasn't on at the beginning of the cruise. A comedian was coming off. I was going on. This particular port that I was getting on the ship, they couldn't literally come into the port. It was too shallow. So what they do is they have the boat docked offshore, a couple hundred, feet or yards. And so so I had to take a little dinghy out to the boat.
Oh.
And they literally threw a ladder over the side.
And you had to climb
they
up
said,
the
well,
side
throw
of
your
the-
luggage up first, and I'm throwing it up there, right? And I had to climb the ladder. And of course, there's people lined up, and they're watching that. They probably think I'm some guy that works, on the crew. And then, 2-3 nights later, I'm the headliner at the comedy club. And of course, I made a whole routine.
What a
out
way
of
to
it,
make an entrance.
Yeah, so, absolutely.
They probably thought you were a refugee trying to escape Cuba or something.
Exactly. But Joan Rivers, who towards the end of her career continued to do cruise ships, and a lot of big names don't do them because it's just not lucrative enough for them. But whatever the reason she was doing them, and they would fly her in by helicopter.
Yeah.
She'd do the show would be over. They'd put her in that helicopter and take her back off again. But
And these cruise ships are not
they're
huge.
floating.
They're like Noah's Ark. I mean,
they're
it's like-
they're like floating cities. Some of them,
Yeah.
But and then the thing is about cruising. If you're chosen to do those, you can make a living just doing cruises your whole career. But you do pay a big price for that because you're literally tied up with the cruises, and then suddenly your contract ends, and then maybe you've been doing cruising for 3 or 4 years,
Yeah.
and then suddenly you have nothing in your calendar because you've been living on cruises,
Yeah.
and you're out of sight, out of mind. Maybe. So it's not for everybody. It's not for family people. It's not. I'm watching you. I'm watching you. I thought it was. Is that 3 fingers you're putting up? Okay, good.
Okay.
All right. And,
It's not one finger, that's not.
but I meet a lot of people on cruises that are entertainers, and they're on 3 marriages, or they have no children, and they work together, as a family, as a husband and wife team, and so you meet all kinds of.
like Edie and Steve, right?
Yeah, exactly. Steve and Ida Gomez. Oh my God! Now you're really dating me. I think you and I are just on the cusp of Steve and Edie, but Frank's old friends. But yeah, I mean, it's not for everybody. I got kind of tired of it. I did a lot of them.
Okay.
5 weeks in Alaska sounds exciting until you've been in Alaska for 5 weeks. It's
One night I spent a week in West Virginia.
yeah, exactly.
It's
It's kind of like that. But there's worse ways to make a living than being out in the middle of the sea and making people laugh. And hey, the other thing is you bomb. Where are you going to go? Right? You're in the middle of the ocean. And if you bomb,
Overboard.
where are you going to go? There's no place to hide. So you try to have a good show. But,
So what's next for you? What's on your...
well, actually, my calendar is. I'm trying to focus more on the private events, and I'm doing some motivational comedy now and things like that, and the voiceover stuff. I really enjoy being able to be in my pajamas.
Yeah, right.
I go in, I have a script from a client. I go in, I record it. I'm also launching a site very soon. It'll be. I'm creating. The best way to describe it is animated videos, customized animated videos.
Animate, yeah.
Yeah, basically I can take a caricature of a famous celebrity, for example, like Robert DeNiro, President Obama, Ross Perot, Ross Perot.
Yeah, well, maybe.
I don't know why Ross Perot came out.
Well,
Donald Trump is what I meant to
okay.
say. And you can actually take a caricature of them. I can animate it within this software that this person does for me, and I can do the voiceover.
Yeah.
And I can say anything, and it'll make that picture move
Right.
with any message.
Right.
Now, the applications are birthdays, anniversaries, corporate events.
Right.
Some people have PowerPoint presentations, and they can have Barack Obama or Donald Trump introduce their speaker, roast somebody, and this can all be done.
That's not new.
It's not new, but it's
It's more commercial, maybe?
It's more commercial.
But it was
it's easier-
industrial.
and it's
for
easier
a
to
long
make them
time,
now. I mean, the
yeah.
technology is there now.
Thank you, Walt Disney.
Yeah, and it's cheaper to do them. I can knock those out very, very quickly now.
Okay.
And I've sold them for big corporate events, Fortune 500
Well, you got to
companies.
get your money back from the program.
Absolutely.
That's
Actually, the
important.
program is very inexpensive. So I'm also creating a site where you can have your baby's first birthday, for example.
Yeah.
I can animate the baby in an unbelievably realistic way to speak and invite people to its own first birthday
Oh,
party or
wonderful.
whatever the special occasion is. And your pet. I've done literally hundreds of greetings where I take a picture of a dog, a
Yeah,
cat,
yeah.
even a pig. I can animate it.
This is a Jewish show. What are you saying pig for?
A live
the
pig,
animal.
a live pig, not a cooked
Doesn't
pig,
matter.
not an eaten pig.
Doesn't matter.
But you can animate the pet and actually make a Christmas greeting, a
Well,
Hanukkah
this is a
greeting,
Jewish show. There you go again.
a Hanukkah greeting. It could be
Yeah, yeah,
anything.
I love that I know this guy because I could tease him.
Oh, yo,
That's
yo,
it.
yo.
You be watching.
But the technology is there now. You can make these things, and
So we could spin a dreidel, and you can make the dreidel talk.
there you go. Absolutely.
Okay.
I can remember. I even had a client. I do a lot of car dealership stuff.
Yes.
For new.
You always
for new-
have.
Yes, and all over the country. And the guy goes, "Hey, can you make? I have a used car lot,
Yeah.
and I'm in Virginia. I have 500 cars. Can you
Right.
make the cars sell themselves?"
Yeah.
So I can take a photo of the car looking head on.
Yeah.
And make the grill actually come to life, give it eyes, and the car tells you about all the features. And I can do it in a funny voice. If it's a sports car, you give it a British accent. If it's maybe an Italian-made car, could sound like DeNiro, whatever.
Or,
I mean, there's a lot of creativity you
Christopher
can do.
Lloyd would be perfect for
Absolutely.
Back to the Future.
It's a DeLorean. I use
right.
DeLorean. So there's a lot of cool stuff out there. And again, getting back to what I said before, it's diversification. If you can do all this cool stuff and you can make a living.
Yeah, well, there's been a lot of talking cars.
It's
so.
true. Not quite as good as me, but
No, not as good, nowhere near as good
all
as
as good as you.
So,
Listen, we had a good time. Mark.
Yes, we
We had
did.
a time,
can you
yeah.
do wedding invitations where you'll...
Absolutely.
He's ready to hire you.
Absolutely. We'll talk off camera. I'll tell you what I can do.
We'll talk, okay.
All right, very good. Listen, he impersonate, I don't know, we need a Jewish character, but in any case,
You did, man. You said Jackie Mason. I do a little bit. Not a great Jackie Mason. I haven't done him in years, but he's one of my funny guys. Talks like this. I can never understand what the hell he's saying. You know what I'm saying? But I love Jackie Mason.
But I love those old guys. They're great.
And they love you back.
I do.
and we love you over here. Hopefully you get you and Church
Yes,
too
Rabbi.
much over here.
Thank you
you
so
very
much.
much
God
for
bless.
being on it, and
It's
only good
always-
things with a lot
always
of
good
success.
things. You see, you're
Absolutely.
6'5", you could stretch.
I
it.
am, absolutely.
Okay. Continued success to you.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much, Mark.